Good morning, my name is Josh from CyclonesOZ and welcome to your detailed forecast update for December 13th, 2024. We have a lot to get through once again today, especially over in Queensland where torrential rainfall has drenched the far north and central coasts overnight. We've got plenty more of rainfall on the way as well for central parts of Queensland. We'll also talk about a weak tropical low that's expected to spin up in either the Gulf of Carpentaria or the Coral Sea around Christmas time. We've got thunderstorms as well into the southeast and the northeast of New South Wales, warm weather across central Australia, and then showers and storms expected to continue dominating the scene over in Western Australia and the Northern Territory. All of that plus more coming up in today's weather forecast. If you are brand new to the channel, please consider subscribing, but we're going to get stuck straight into things today over in the far north of Queensland. Once again, some torrential rainfall accumulations have been reported not only last night but over the last couple of days in general. Accumulations up to 180 millimetres have been reported outside of Townsville, just towards the southeast of Townsville. Actually, the heaviest of falls have been reported over the last 24 hours. Some heavy rain still occurring around the Mackay area. It is going to start to ease off from about now, but there is still a couple of good drops of rainfall occurring there. There'll be more showers and thunderstorms as the day goes on as well. We're expecting thunderstorms to fire up from later on this afternoon and evening. We'll likely see that occur across the Atherton Tablelands and across the far north Queensland coast just in general. Some good thunderstorms expected to pop up there, and some of them could pack a punch in terms of severity, with heavy rainfall possible around the Daintree rainforest and also along the Cassowary coast as well. The thunderstorms up there are going to be pretty isolated, all things considered, and then outside of the far north of Queensland, in terms of sort of a more central Queensland area down towards Townsville, Bowen, even though we're still in the far north, some decent falls are still expected to continue throughout the course of today, and for that I'd like to use a simple forecast model. So you can see as we break down the rainfall throughout the next 24 hours, it is going to be heading steadily further and further offshore. There'll still be some showers here and there, especially along the central Queensland coastline. Another 25 millimetres is entirely possible around the Mackay and Ogmore area. We'll also likely see from the spin-up tropical low that's just offshore from the Queensland coastline, that, well, not tropical low, but this low pressure area attached to the trough that's driving all of this rainfall around Queensland. We'll also likely see a couple of good showers and storms possibly funneled ashore around the northern areas of the Sunshine Coast, around Hervey Bay, extending up towards Bundaberg, Gladstone and Agnes Water, and as such some decent accumulations are possible there. And when I say decent, I use that term pretty loosely, just considering their drought conditions. Any rainfall could be classed as decent rainfall there. What I am meaning is sort of accumulations between 5 and 20 millimetres throughout the course of today. Nothing flash, but it will be very welcome indeed. Rainfall accumulations along the Sunshine Coast are expected to pipe up tomorrow. You can see from the low pressure areas it heads further south into Queensland. Along the Sunshine Coast there will be some good falls tomorrow morning and into the early afternoon, from heavy showers streaming ashore in bands just over extended periods of time, and as such those rainfall accumulations along the Sunshine Coast, and especially into the more mountainous areas between Kingaroy and up towards Mount Perry, will likely be exacerbated tomorrow. The forecast is calling for between 20 and 30 millimetres there. I reckon that might be a little bit on the lighter side. I think rainfall accumulations could amount to 50 or 60 millimetres, especially considering the 3-day accumulations now look really healthy across parts of the Sunshine Coast, between about 20 and 50 millimetres around Maroochydore. The accumulations into the southeast of Queensland, which we will get to later on the forecast update, they're not looking too flash there, unfortunately. But further up the coast around Agnes Water and Bundaberg until Monday morning, you can see around 60 or 70 millimetres there. Same deal with Bundaberg, between 40 and 60 millimetres, and then up towards Yeppoon and Rockhampton around sort of that 50 or 60 millimetre mark. So again, some healthy rainfall accumulations are possible there, and that's just from the showers that are going to be streaming ashore over the coming couple of days, especially tomorrow morning and into the early afternoon. Some good showers there. The rainfall is going to head steadily further north throughout the coming couple of days. You can see Sunday it's going to be the central Queensland's coast turn for some heavier showers. You can see plenty of shower activity expected from the mid-morning into the late afternoon and into the early evenings. Now some of these showers could turn to storms at time, or tend to rainfall as well at times, and the heavy rainfall is most likely to be concentrated around the Rockhampton and Gladstone area, and as such that's why the accumulations there for this weekend are around sort of that 50 or 60 millimetre mark. Again, nothing too crazy is expected. Unfortunately, the rainfall isn't going to be heavy enough to kind of quench the drought conditions that are extending between Gladstone and Bundaberg at this time. It's kind of the only pocket in Queensland that is experiencing below average rainfall at this time, so the rainfall there unfortunately is going to be enough to kind of quench that drought, but it will certainly go a long way in helping. Showers and thunderstorms expected Sunday afternoon outside of Charters Towers and Townsville. Also showers and thunderstorms continuing along the coastline throughout Monday and Tuesday, but the rainfall doesn't really pipe up again until at least the 18th or the 19th of December. You can see it does become a little bit more widespread throughout both the 18th and the 19th, and this is where we need to head further up into the far north of Queensland once again and talk about the tropical low that's going to spin up here. Now normally I concentrate all of the tropical cyclone stuff towards the end of this video, or towards the end of my videos, but I'm choosing to do it at the start because this is now an important feature. For the last couple of days, the meteorology has been giving a 15 to 25% chance of tropical cyclone genesis in the Gulf of Carpentaria sometime towards the middle or the end of next week. The GFS and the Axis G3 forecast models have been backing a system, and now the Eastern BEF is finally coming to terms with a weak spin-up that's likely to happen around the 18th or the 19th of December on Wednesday or Thursday offshore from Lockhart River. Now, this system here is never expected to get really strong. It's not expected to get up towards Category 2 or 3 strength tropical cyclone status, but it does have a very good shot of becoming a tropical low, and probably close to a 50-50 shot of becoming a fully fledged tropical cyclone as well. So let's take a look at what it's expected to do. From enhanced moisture, it's expected to spin up on around Thursday offshore from the Cape York Peninsula. You can see between the other forecast models it could either happen over the Cape York Peninsula or in the Gulf of Carpentaria, but it does look like it's got more forecast model support right now to happen closer to the Coral Sea or in the Coral Sea sometime into the early parts of next week. Now, as this Coral Sea tropical low does begin to wrap up, it is going to be driving all of that rainfall ashore, or at least on the southern side of the system, south of Cooktown. It's going to be driving all of this rainfall ashore into the far north of Queensland. Depending on where the low pressure is going to be situated, come by Friday, it's most likely to be situated around the Cooktown area, somewhere in this vicinity of the Cape York Peninsula, or just offshore from it, and as such, the Cassowary Coast and especially the Daintree Coast are going to be in the box seat to have a bit of a rainfall event, some kind of atmospheric river funneling all of this rainfall ashore here, and we will likely see some torrential rainfall towards the end of next week across far north Queensland. Their first real taste of the tropical rainfall, the first real proper tropical rainfall for wet season 24/25. Now, this tropical low here, it really never gets a foothold, especially if you're a follower of the Eastern BEF forecast model, and even the GFS kills this storm off pretty quickly, and the reason for that is just going to be unfavourable conditions. The season's not ready for tropical activity in the Coral Sea, even though that we're in December now. The wind shear is still too high, and as such, this system here never gets to any kind of reasonable strength or any worrisome strength, and it does get killed off pretty quickly and absorbed by a much larger low pressure system and come around Sunday or Monday the 22nd or 23rd. So the rainfall, while it will be heavy across the far north of Queensland, it is likely to be short-lived as this system gets dragged away from the coastline, and as such, not too much is expected. Still, though, it's a complicated forecast and certainly something we do need to keep a close eye on. If I have completely scrambled your brain on this, or if you've got specific questions or comments, then please do let me know in the comment section down below. And let's talk about rainfall accumulations right now, because that is going to be the most important factor of this system, regardless of if it develops or not. Rainfall accumulations from the Eastern BEF forecast model aren't anything crazy, and in fact it is the lowest of what the other forecast models are suggesting as well, so we're going to stick to the more reliable GFS forecast model for this forecast here. Depending on how the system develops, if it does develop slowly in the Gulf of Carpentaria and then it actually crosses the Cape York Peninsula and heads into the Coral Sea as a semi-mature tropical low, that's when we're going to get the most amount of rainfall for the Cape York Peninsula and for far north Queensland. That situation right now is probably a 50-50 chance of happening. There is a chance that this system still completely busts, but let's take the forecast now as it is and look at what happens if this system does actually do some interesting stuff and become a tropical low. And as such, this is of course pretty much the worst case scenario in terms of rainfall, and the reason why I'm reporting on it is, especially at this time of the year, it is better to be safe than sorry. Rainfall accumulations around the Cape York Peninsula are going to be high, up towards 300 millimeters just over this 5-day period that I'm showing on the forecast right now. The highest accumulations, like I said, are going to be into the Daintree. They look set up into the box seat for the highest rainfall accumulations, and rainfall accumulations above 100 millimeters are going to be extending inland to about Laura, Chillago, and Mount Carbine as well. Heavy rainfall up towards 250 millimeters expected around Cape Tribulation and Port Douglas. Wudgell expecting close to 200 millimeters. Cairns also about 200 millimeters. And keep in mind the heaviest falls, which are currently around the Daintree, but the heaviest of the falls are completely dependent on where this system tracks. A wobble to the north will bring the rainfall further north up towards Cooktown, and a wobble to the south will bring it into the more far northern Queensland areas that we're familiar with around sort of Cairns and Innisfail and Tully. So again, there is still a lot of variables in this forecast here. Now, depending on how much onshore flow rainfall that the far north of Queensland coastline, the Cassowary Coast, does get, between Cairns and Innisfail and Tully, accumulations are expected to be between 100 and 250 millimeters. That is a little bit lackluster even for a system like this, and again, just considering the low resolution nature of the GFS forecast model, where I would like to use the Axis G3 forecast model, which has a much higher resolution and can crank out much more data, I still think that these rainfall accumulations here are a little bit excessive, at least what the Axis G3 is suggesting, but it gives you a better idea of just kind of the variability of the rainfall across the far north of Queensland, depending on where the rainfall gets jammed up against in some of these mountains. Accumulations between 400 and 500 millimeters are not entirely unlikely towards the end of next week and into next weekend. So this is certainly something that I'm going to keep a very close eye on. There's still a huge scope of uncertainty regarding this system, both in terms of intensity, track, and also the impacts expected for the far north of Queensland. Queensland. What I have shown you right now is my best guess at what's actually going to happen. It's also the worst case scenario in terms of rainfall, especially that 300 or 400 millimeters that could happen around the Cassowary coast. The forecast will develop and evolve over the coming couple of days as well, so there's going to be plenty to talk about, so make sure you are subscribed, but at this time take this forecast with a very heavy pinch of salt and consult other agencies if you are still unsure. But if you've got any questions or comments, or you'd like to give me some feedback, then please do let me know in the comment section down below, and I'd be more than happy to read and respond to what you have to say. In terms of the Queensland weather forecast, or at least for the tropical Queensland weather forecast, that basically can't set, but down into the southeast we do have the chance of some severe thunderstorms, and this is certainly something we're going to want to keep a close eye on as well. Like I said, that onshore flow happening into the early parts and even into the middle parts of next week, and as such the southeast of Queensland looking pretty dry, all things considered. Severe thunderstorms could fire back up on the forecast, or at least I did see them firing back up on the forecast around Christmas time. It looks like the latest update has completely killed them off, so we might be stuck with nothing to talk about, but it looks like those temperatures and those conditions are going to come primed for severe thunderstorm activity. Plenty of heat, plenty of humidity expected to come on the cards around the New Year's time, and you can see it here on the humidity forecast here. I mean, humidity values looking pretty healthy as we get into the New Year's, and also into the New Year's period after Christmas. Those temperatures are going to skyrocket across the southeast. This is kind of the precursor stuff to what could be a bit of a week-long severe thunderstorm outbreak across the southeast or the north east of Queensland, New South Wales respectively. Now, of course, I really am fishing here deep into the forecast for severe thunderstorms to obviously talk about for the video, but and again, you would want to take this forecast with a pretty heavy pinch of salt, but this trend here that I'm seeing on the forecast, or what I'm actually seeing here on the forecast, those warm temperatures, those high humidity values, and also those elevated convective available potential energy values. I mean, take a look at this massive energy in the atmosphere. When we do see thunderstorms or a line of thunderstorms fire up in the forecast, they're going to have a lot of healthy stuff to kind of make the most of around Boxing Day or later on, so I would not be surprised if in the lead up to the New Year's period we saw some substantial severe thunderstorm outbreaks across the southeast of Queensland. This is of course looking very long range at this time, and I find it pretty hard to call this a forecast. This is more of just a hunch at this time, but again, certainly something to keep an eye on if you do live in the southeast of Queensland or the northeast of New South Wales. Certainly some gnarly stuff now possible by the looks of things, and certainly something we're going to want to keep a very close eye on. In terms of rainfall accumulations, though, for New South Wales and Queensland just as a whole, it's really not looking healthy over the next kind of 14 days. There are a couple of good drops here and there in the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, but apart from that, New South Wales high and dry, Victoria high and dry, Tasmania kind of the only exception, still getting a couple of remnant cold fronts through there. Let's talk about interior Australia. Plenty to talk about on this front here. Temperatures, and that is just kind of the main story at this time. So across interior Australia, it's not unusual to see days of around 43, 44 degrees at this time of the year, but I'm just going to lay this out right now. Extremely warm temperatures are expected into the later parts of next week and into next weekend, and then into the Christmas period. I mean, this is really going to get quite warm across interior parts of Western Australia, starting from about the 21st of December. I mean, you can see daytime maxima around the 90-mile beach area outside of Broome and Port Hedland up towards 48 or 49 degrees, and then a lot of communities expecting in excess of 43 or 44. So it's going to be very warm over there again. It gets warmer and warmer the further you go into the forecast period, and by Christmas time we're really looking at a couple of scorchers. I mean, over in Western Australia, daytime maxima of around sort of that 47, 48 degree for Christmas Eve, and into interior Australia between 44 and 46 for quite a lot of locations. And then on Christmas Day, I mean, it's going to be a hot one across interior parts of Australia. It's certainly not going to be a white Christmas. It is a white Christmas on this temperature forecast, though the temperatures are that high. Up to 48 into parts of Western Australia, between 47 and 48 into interior parts of South Australia, and then 47 for interior parts of Queensland and parts of New South Wales. Boxing Day as well, it's not going to be much better. That heat now moving further east, and it looks like it's going to be a hot end to the year, that's for sure, across interior parts of New South Wales and Queensland, just with how this heat is steadily moving towards the east come around the 26th and the 27th of December. Certainly going to be a hot one, certainly going to be pretty sticky as well across interior parts of Australia, and that will obviously give way to some pretty good thunderstorms. Into the southwest of Western Australia, finally that heat has left the southwestern corner, or at least around the coastal regions. It's going to be a muggy day in Perth today. Humidity values around sort of that 40 or 50% as we go for a top of 32, so those heat index values are going to be very high indeed, and that's also going to give way to some very nice thunderstorms across into interior parts of Western Australia, into the Weed Belt, the Goldfields, and parts of the Murchison region as well. Severe thunderstorms expected to fire up from around midday onwards. There's going to be plenty of them to talk about as well. I mean, you can see here on the axis G3 convective forecast model, plenty of stuff is expected across interior parts of Australia. Some substantial rainfall accumulations also possible from the right thunderstorm. We could be looking at accumulations up towards 100 or 150 millimetres across interior parts of WA over the next 24 hours just from the right thunderstorm moving through, because the rainfall today, just considering the convective pattern that we're going to be seeing, it is going to be very, very heavy indeed, torrential in fact at times across interior parts of the goldfields. Thankfully, hardly anyone lives here across interior Western Australia, so there really isn't too much to talk about in terms of the human impact from this kind of weather system and these thunderstorms that are going to blow through. But again, make sure you are staying safe, because that is some very heavy falls expected. Rainfall accumulations in general for Western Australia, I mean, they're not looking too flash over the next 14 days. There will still be some good drops from the thunderstorms expected to blow up this afternoon and into tomorrow afternoon across parts of the Pilbara region. Thunderstorms there have been very consistent over the last sort of couple of days, and that's from that tropical low moving offshore, but those thunderstorms will now steadily ease off into next week. And then rainfall accumulations across parts of the Northern Territory from thunderstorms are also going to be kind of steadily on the downtrend. It looks like we might move into a bit of a dry phase with the monsoon trough heading over into Queensland, delivering the rainfall through there. But it looks like around Christmas time a little bit more rainfall might pipe up onto the forecast, just in time for a tropical low to fire up across parts of Western Australia. Now, this is of course just another forecast this time, but the other forecast models have been suggesting something much later into the forecast period as well, closer to the 14-day forecast period, i.e. Christmas time now, of a tropical low that could spin up offshore from Western Australia and become a reasonably strong tropical cyclone somewhere offshore from Western Australia. I mean, you can see the Eastern Bear forecast suggesting it right now with a pressure of around that, or below 1,000 millibars. I mean, that's not strong at all, but it does look like some kind of tropical low might spin up offshore from Western Australia around sort of Christmas or just after Christmas. GFS forecast model having pretty much none of it. In fact, it calls for the system to spin up around parts of the Gulf of Carpentaria and then slide across into Queensland. So again, that's going to be something to talk about for another forecast update. But there's certainly rumbles of activity that tropical activity will return to northern parts of Australia sometime around sort of the 23rd or the 24th of December. At this time, it looks really unlikely again that we're going to be seeing Christmas tropical cyclones in the vicinity, but what does concern me is just how active it looks like the Coral Sea is going to become around sort of Christmas time. I mean, we're already seeing the rumbles of tropical cyclone activity, or tropical low activity rather, around sort of Wednesday and Thursday this week, so it is now becoming quite a lot closer to home for the far north of Queensland. But it does look like the tropical low activity, we might be waiting in terms of tropical cyclone activity for quite a while at this time. Rainfall accumulations, though, they're certainly going to be quite elevated over the next 14 days across the tropics, and I mean, we've already talked about Queensland, but over the next 14 days just in general across northern parts of WA and into the Northern Territory, it does look pretty healthy once again. Interior parts still struggling with a little bit of that rainfall though. It would be really good to see a tropical low or a tropical cyclone barrel through some areas, bringing plenty of rainfall across interior parts of the Northern Territory, especially across the interior parts of the Northern Territory. I mean, they're not exactly in drought conditions at this time, but they've struggled for rainfall over the last couple of weeks or so. They did have a very good helping about a month ago, and you can see it here on the drought monitoring maps. The soil moisture values across interior parts of Western Australia and Queensland, they need no introduction and pretty much no help either. But the Northern Territory is still looking a little bit dry at this time. We always knew Western Australia would get off to a bumper wet season. I didn't expect it to be this bumper, though. It certainly has had a very good start to the wet season, but again, rainfall accumulations have been very healthy pretty much across the board across Northern Australia this wet season so far. But yeah, back to the tropical forecast. It is still a very complicated one in terms of the future of the northern parts or the northern basins of Australia. Western Australia is always looking out for tropical lows, especially at this time of the year, and again, I would not be surprised if something was to wrap up around sort of Christmas time, but the likelihood of an impact on the WA coastline, it looks really minimal at this time. It will likely create some very good weather for boating, fishing, and going to the beach just in general after Christmas time, though into the New Year's period. And then across into the Gulf of Carpentaria and the Coral Sea, it's still a little bit of a wild card at this time what actually does develop, but there's been rumbles on the forecast for the last 2 weeks that we're going to be seeing something sort of towards the end of next week or into the Christmas period, so we will have to keep a very close eye on things. The Coral Sea, it's overdue for a tropical cyclone now. We're certainly waiting for things to pipe up there, and I reckon they will into the first month of 2025. I certainly reckon that there's some interesting stuff is just around the corner for the Coral Sea, and especially considering that the long-range forecast is suggesting that as well. So certainly something that I want to keep a close eye on. It's been a pretty dragged out tropical forecast for Australia, but you thought we were done. Well, we're going to keep things in the southern hemisphere and head over towards Madagascar, and I'm going to have to stay really zoomed out on this one just so people get a sense of scale. But we did have a very powerful tropical cyclone barrel towards Madagascar last night. This system, Tropical Cyclone Chido, has since weakened, but I want to show you this just because the southern hemisphere can produce some monster tropical cyclones, and it certainly did last night. I mean, take a look at this system here of Category 4 strength proportions on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale, obviously a Category 5 on the Australian scale with winds of up to 250 kilometers an hour. And again, I use this as an example to show you just the power of what tropical cyclones can do in the southern hemisphere. This system was actually part of the remnant energy of the system that was expected to develop around the Cocos-Keeling Islands. It got dragged into this system over here a couple of days ago and rapidly developed into this tropical cyclone. So this system was actually once on Bureau Meteorology's radar for tropical cyclone genesis offshore from Western Australia. And if you go back and take a look at a 4 or 5 day satellite loop, it certainly is quite interesting what happens with some of the thunderstorms offshore from Australia in the tropical cyclone convergence zone or the tropical convergence zone on the Indian Ocean. It certainly can produce some interesting stuff, especially on the satellite pictures. But this system here now well and truly offshore from Australia, about 7,000 kilometers away. It would take you well over 8 hours to fly here if you were on a plane. Certainly some interesting stuff indeed. You could get to Sydney and back from Perth in the time that it would take you to fly out to this tropical cyclone. This is a very long way offshore from Western Australia. A system much closer to home, though, is of course the dying tropical low 02U here. You can see it's still trying to spin something resemblant of a tropical low up. It is really struggling at this time, and obviously no convection is being made, but it is still responsible for some of the showers and thunderstorms across interior parts of Western Australia. So this system here, even though it's a really weak tropical low far away from Western Australia, not bringing direct impacts to Western Australia, it is still causing some problems for farmers and ranchers up into the northern parts of Western Australia, just with the amount of rainfall that they're getting, and also with the amount of flooding that some of the rivers have been producing, especially around Marble Bar and other mining areas. But yeah, that is all that I have time for today. Thanks so much for watching the video to this point. If you haven't already, then please consider subscribing, and also a special shout out to the channel sponsors. The names are on screen right now. Again, I could not run the show without them, so their support is also much appreciated. If you've got any questions or comments, especially about the Queensland weather forecast, I understand if that's scrambled a few people's heads this morning, so please do let me know in the comment section down below if that does apply to you, and I will catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.